So we're moving into a section now entitled Lightning Talks. This is all about how universal basic income might change the lives of our speakers or those around them, or those who they represent. So I'd like to invite you to speak for 5 minutes. I'm going to give you a little warning when you're coming up, so 1 minute warning when you're coming up to the end. So I do apologise in advance for interrupting you, but we're on a quite tight schedule now. I'm going to invite you each to speak. If you can hold the microphone up to your mouth, please, just because some people have found it a little hard to hear. So first off, we have Louis. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to sit that way? Yeah. Super. So Louis is going to speak to you. Louis is from UBI Lab Greater Manchester, and he's going to speak to you about his perspective.
Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me properly? Good. I'll try and be as quick as possible. Lightning quick is not something I am. So first of all, I'm a student. I'm a master's student at Manchester Uni, studying political economy, and almost finished. I've got 1 month to do. But yeah. So as this is meant to be personal, I will. Well, talk about how UBI could change my life personally, but this obviously applies to a lot of people. Well, most people probably. So first of all, in my current situation, I think I wouldn't feel guilty for doing the masters. I started my masters in tough conditions in 2020. I did it part time, so I could work at the same time, but obviously because of COVID, I couldn't, and also was declared clinically vulnerable, and so I couldn't really work outside, so to speak, and I didn't really want to be bored and not doing anything, so I decided to do a masters. And it is my opinion that even if it's higher education, the privilege, it shouldn't be for only those who are privileged enough to do one. So I would be less reliant on part-time work and universal credit, who treat me like a fool for doing a masters, to be honest. They think I should just quit now, even if I've got only a couple of weeks to do. Next I will be able to cut down my part-time hours while studying. I would be able to put more energy into the topics I love, reading, writing and discussing. In turn I'd be able to give back to society more and do things I enjoy, like even simple things like play more football, or start like a football team in the community, something I'd really like to do. In terms of like mental health, I would be able to worry less about paying bills, helping myself to be less anxious, and it doesn't just go for me, but it goes for my friends, my brother, a lot of people who I know also struggle with anxiety because of money, because not got enough basically. I could focus on my health and on helping others. Lastly, UBI loosens people's dependency on work. I would obviously still have to, everyone would still have to work full time really, and I would definitely have to. But I would not have to take the first job offer I see, the first, low wage basically. I could be able to negotiate myself and be less reliant on work to pay my bills. My life would no longer revolve around being worried about finding work and getting the wage as soon as possible. I would have more time to think about what job I really want to do. And I've already said this, but I think it's a good point. I would be able to spend time on things I care about, like being creative and taking things like this. But hopefully, presumably, if we had a UBI, we wouldn't have UBI conferences. So, unless we might really like to talk about it. So, 1 minute. I'd be able, I think. One point I miss, I'd be able to save. I don't have any savings. I spent them all on uni, so I'd be able to, do that. And I think I've basically said it all. So, that's me.
Thank you. Moving me to hand now to Alison. Alison has kindly agreed to speak about her sister's experiences. Thank you, Alison.
Right, well, thanks, Beth. I wasn't going to be part of this. Cleo was, and she's the person who's been delayed on the train. I actually sort of interviewed my sister last week as just to really sort of go deep into these ideas. And I said, if I end up saying anything about you, is that okay? She said, tell them all of it. So I thought, okay, I've got a chance to do that now. So she, and there's something here I didn't know. So she's been on incapacity benefit for 14 years. She's sort of in her early 60s. And she said, even the word incapacity is hideous. It does nothing for your self-esteem. And she said, if I'd had a basic income, I wouldn't have had to complain, I wouldn't have had to claim, I wouldn't have had to go through the awful assessment interviews, male doctors not believing you. She's got fibromyalgia and ME and has had for years and years. Now, I know with long COVID, people are thinking differently about that. But what she talked about is how difficult it is that it's a hidden illness. And she can look fine and she can do something. She can pull out all the stops, but be in agony for days afterwards, which people don't really understand. So you can look at her and think, well, she managed to do that. So perhaps somebody might think, well, she could do a job. And she always had to justify herself when she was younger. But with a hidden illness, there's always the fear that the benefit could be taken away. Also, and I recognise this, I've suffered from depression in the past myself, I haven't been on benefit, I definitely recognise this, can be afraid of getting better. A hidden fear, if not ill enough, could lose benefit. So you sort of lose your status, your identity, perhaps is a better word, as this person. You're quite fearful of moving out of it. The word benefit, she said, conjures up scrounging, not contributing. So the UBI would be a great social leveller, would make you more flexible. So she's in the church, she does a lot of youth work, a lot of children's work, she does people that's stated afterwards. She said, it's my guilty secret. I don't come from a something for nothing culture. And she's had chronic illness, she's had 3 children, she's done an awful lot. But she's tried to work part-time, and so if she hadn't worked part-time, she thinks her health, her mental health and her physical health would have been so much better. And she would have been able to do the sort of things that Louis was talking about, the things that she feels drawn to, which is sort of youth work. To basically would have taken off a massive pressure. I could have done more helping with Brownie's youth work, and I would have felt that this was valid work. So she's put all of this work into the community and not felt it was valid or validated. So, as I say, a lot of that I can relate to as well. I think I finished actually, that was everything I had to say, if that's all right, I'm on visionary. Is that okay?
Thank you, Alison. It's a really powerful thing to share the stories of yourselves and other people you love, so we really appreciate the bravery. I'd like to introduce Dr. Simon Duffy from Citizens Network Research, who's going to speak now.
Thank you. So in a funny way, I think, not really with any income guaranteed, but I kind of live a bit like I've got basic income through a mixture of luck and just getting enough money on a modest income. So one of the things about my life now is that I do just kind of do what I believe in. And that's fantastic. I don't feel like I have to compromise too much. But I thought the way I tell the story a little bit is just going back to my beginning experience of basic income, which was actually as a philosophy student at Edinburgh. I was intrigued by the problem of social justice. What does it mean to live in an equal society? And to be honest, just thinking it through led you to basic income. Everybody needs enough, what Natalie Bennett was saying. Everybody needs that basic minimum. It seemed to me the only logical way of solving that problem. And then in my life, I left university and thought I should do something. I didn't know really what I should do. I applied for jobs because it was the late 80s. I applied for all these jobs with PricewaterhouseCoopers because they were the people who took them at university. I don't know what the fuck they did, sorry. But I would go and I would get through the first interview and then they would ask me about my motivation, and I discovered actually I wasn't remotely motivated to work for an accountancy firm. And what I ended up doing was working with people with disabilities in bizarrely, because in the north you only get jobs by going to London. So I had to go to get a job. And so I had a very great time working alongside people with disabilities. But that was the kind of second phase for me of discovering my enthusiasm for basic income, because you just understood, and Alison's touched on it, how terrible the benefit system is. All the damaging things it does to people. And I won't give a lecture on that, but it's just like, it's tons of things that screw people's lives up. And just one aspect of that doesn't come through enough is it kind of screws families up. It often creates very weird incentives for families not to get together. Like there was a couple I knew who lived in different flats. They'd lose basically 50% of their rental income if they lived together. You know, so that system just doesn't work. And back in 2009, the next stage of my life was I set up this thing called it was called the Centre for Welfare Reform at the time, which I thought was a good way of saying, you know, this idea of welfare reform, which for the Tories means destroying the welfare state. Wouldn't it be a good idea to think about welfare reform as a positive thing, because that's what reform means? In the end, I abandoned the name. Nobody could get it. Everybody just assumes welfare reform is a negative thing. But what that led to was actually doing lots of research around the experience of people in the benefit system. And again, without going through everything, you know, personally, one of the things that made my life better with basic income is not really about the increased suicide level of people with disabilities because of the current benefit system. Yeah, I mean, the stuff that's going on because of that system is extraordinarily vicious and horrible and totally underreported. But what I want to end on, in a way, for me personally, is I think my focus has become more and more focused, in a sense, on the positive possibilities, and Natalie Bennett was talking about. I think it's a good phrase, we should think about it. The basic income society. What would it be like to live in a world where people's basic economic security was guaranteed? I think one of the things it would do, which I feel like I try and do myself already, but for many people feels impossible, is allow you to be a citizen. One of the things we've done together with Opus, who helped set up the UBI Lab Network, is create something called the Neighbourhood Democracy Movement. Actually, the places this is really starting is Wigan, another great place in the north of England, and Sheffield, a really interesting game. Lots of people want to be better citizens, but the system doesn't enable them economically and in their own communities. It's not even clear where to begin. Like Sheffield has a population of 600,000, 142 neighbourhoods, and no structures to enable citizens to engage in their own community. I mean, actually giving people a basic income frees people up to be citizens. It frees people up to do the kind of things Alison and we talked about, contribute, help, things people do. But practically, people will also be punished if the DW finds out you're contributing, because you could have been working, couldn't you? Or actually, if you're contributing, it shows you don't really have a serious disability. We've got to kill this system and move to something positive, hopeful, that promotes the citizenship of every single one of us. Thanks.
Fantastic, thank you, Simon. I would now like to introduce Elliott Johnson, who is an academic and disability rights advocate, who's going to speak to you now. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm working with Matthew on the project more generally at Northumbria, and I'm also related to it, if you need any proof. So some of what I'm going to talk about speaks to his experiences as well, and it's not something that often comes out of personal experiences of academics, professors, because I think there's a lot of fear around bias in results. Business people are allowed to talk about business, are allowed to lobby. People who've been poor aren't allowed to do that for some reason. There's a feeling that it's biased and it's not real evidence. But what happened in my life is that in about 1996, my dad had a horrific time at work and had a breakdown, and he had to leave work. And I'd like to think that at the age of 7, I didn't deserve poverty, which is a common thing that people say. People, you know, they're in their own circumstances, they've built these things. I'd like to think at 7 that wasn't the case. And what we had there was an engagement with a range of welfare systems. So we started off, you know, long-term sick, had some income from that, and then left and had mainly incapacity benefit and a local authority pension that was allowed to be paid early. These are things that wouldn't happen now. These are a system that was slightly better. He then didn't work for the next 15 years, and he's going to do kind of full-time paid work. And there was a time in the late 90s when, you know, there's a way to account for how much income each household has based on the number of people in it. And I calculated that there was a time when our household had a comparable income of £5,000. We were lucky because the house was being paid, the mortgage payments were being paid. Again, good fortune, not something that everyone would have had. We were in absolute abject poverty, but my parents were aspirationally middle class, and there was a lot of pretending that that wasn't the case. I then, becoming an adult, ended up with pretty severe mental health problems and in receipt of employment support allowance, which was the successor to incapacity benefit. And it's that trauma of conditionality and the idea that that money could go at any point lives with you throughout your life, no matter what situation you have. That employment support allowance, I didn't want to put my name to articles I'd written in case that was deemed that I'd, you know, been capable of doing work. I didn't want to be seen to be too active. But again, I knew how the system worked because my parents had been through it. I was lucky and was able to get it. I'm currently in a precarious situation. My positions are entirely grant dependent, and as a lot of you here might know, getting people to fund UBI projects is about as difficult as any possible academic pursuit as you can have. It's getting better, I think, but it's still very troublesome. Again, I'm lucky. I'm married to someone with a pretty high income, but the pressure that places on your relationship, the feelings of self-esteem, are really quite severe. We're in a society that has built these issues. But it turns out it's not just me. This isn't my personal experience. In my last job, I worked for a disability charity, and in particular worked about physical activity. And some of our members have said people will come to our impairment-specific days to do sport, and they will say, please don't take a photo of me. I can't have it get back to the DWP. I might lose my personal independence payment. That was initially just an anecdote. We did a study, and we found that despite them being heavily reliant on that, 41% of people we spoke to said that they'd be being more active in case they lose disability benefits. And a third said they would try to be more active if they were unconditional. That's an immediate potential health benefit there. So what are the reasons for this conditionality? Well, it's been a very effective ideological argument. There are some people who are very, very good at rhetoric, but in collaboration with a colleague at Newcastle, Daniel Nettle, behavioural scientist, we looked at the idea of vigilant cooperation. Humans have evolved to be cooperative, but very attuned to scientific cheating. This is something that's been built on by successive governments. In the late 90s, the new Labour government were very clear that they wanted to stamp out fraud that was measured at 0.5% when it was actually measured. What can we do about this? We need to make sure that disabled people, a whole range of people, aren't seen as an outgroup. These aren't superheroes or scroungers. They are normal people who we speak to, they're in our families, they are us, they are likely to be us when we get older. These are the kind of deliberative democracy type things that we can do. We need to stop referring to disability benefits as a burden. It's a relatively small cost in reality, but beyond that, it's something that government gives to lots of other things, corporate benefits, all these kinds of things. Let's stop referring to it as a burden. The reforms have failed. They've definitely failed. It hasn't achieved any of the stated aims of reducing the number of the caseload, of reducing fraud, or it's higher than when it was measured under disability living allowance. The UBI means that there would always be some income. Even if we have needs testing for some things under UBI, plus potentially there still might be some kind of conditions on some things. Let's make sure people have money in the interim Let's make sure they're not at risk of destitution. We need to develop it with disabled people, that system, not in opposition to them. We have retained needs testing in our economic modelling. That's not to say we endorse it, it's just like to incorporate those kind of things for everyone would massively increase the cost, but there are ways of dealing with these things. So what we're doing next, consulting with disability organisations. We are planning more citizen engagement projects in the future when we're covering the whole population in different conditions. We're encouraging others to consider disability very strongly in these things. We have to stop the situation where we say, oh, we don't know what to do about housing, we don't know what to do about disabled people, we need to have concrete plans. We can't maintain this. And there will be a more detailed section in the final report of the project report that hopefully gives some needs going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elliott. Sorry to rush you there. So next up, I'd like to invite Holly to speak. Holly Phelps is a Manchester-based freelance musician. Holly.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. So I'm Holly. I work as a musician, artist and facilitator, and that means I get to do lots of varied work. I get to work with amazing groups in the community and young people, as well as playing and performing across the city in the UK. So it didn't always start out as being such, I've kind of got the flow of this work after maybe 4 years of doing it. But when I started trying to do it, I worked at people referral unit in Oldham, and this was just after studying. So I went straight into obviously trying to find work that was potentially not exactly what I wanted to be doing, but it was working with people, and I was trying to weave in creativity whenever I could, set up a music group there. This didn't end so well for me because I didn't understand that sleep is a fundamental pillar of health. So I would work in the people referral unit all day, and then I'd do music all night, and then I'd reset and go again. And I think it was just this underlying will to succeed in what I loved. I was doing everything I loved. It was quite intense, obviously. If anyone's ever been to a people referral unit, they're just young people that need extra support. And I did enjoy it, but obviously I was then hospitalised because I couldn't do it. I was just so sleep deprived. We didn't know why. I just started passing out, and we there's lots of suggestions as to why it might be, underlying long-term health issues. And it was actually, we figured out from a nutritionist ultimately, that it was my cortisol levels. So my cortisol levels were completely wrong. And I had to stop, not out of choice, but out of my body actually making me stop. So that was quite a wake-up call for me. And I had to rethink how I was going to then work in this environment. So from there, I've been given lots of work, luckily, but it is very much as freelance life is, as and when. So what universal basic income would mean for me would be that there's this constant knowing that there is some money coming in, and that I would have obviously a better well-being with that. My mental health would be much better, but also I'd be able to take work that is specifically in my field of expertise and interest, and ultimately develop my career, which, as we're all kind of looking to do, whilst trying to keep money in the bank. So it would give me that ability to say no to lower paid work, and I've definitely now got to that point, but it has taken me 4 years to get here. So I'd hope for people coming up that wouldn't be the case, that they'd be able to get to where I'm at faster. It would mean I could actually take holiday, which as a freelancer, you don't, well, you're always on your own time, so you could always answer an email, even if it's 10 at night. You could always be on the phone trying to organise the next project. So it would mean that there would be some more boundaries in the things that you say yes to and the things that you just have to do it because you need to pay the bills. What it would also mean is stability and future planning. I think I've reached a point of this now, but there was definitely a point where I was living day to day and not being able to look to the future. More going, okay, what can I pick up this work here? Can I do a shift there? And ultimately being very detrimental to me and my well-being. During COVID, I've been freelance for about a year before that. So I was advised to get benefits. In that time, it took so long for those to actually come through that I was back working again, so I never actually received those. But there was definitely a moment where I was like, overnight, all my work had gone, and the future was looking quite bleak. Luckily, I was able, with the amazing organisations that I work with, we all went online and we were still able to engage with some young people, not all. Gigs went online, which was very strange. As the reason I love doing them is talking to people and experiencing live events, so it was very isolating, as I'm sure it was for all of us. And one thing that it would help with is cash flow. So often I've done a project where I've spent a lot of my time, but I've not been paid for it yet. So I've learned how to manage this now, but I think at the start that this would be something that would be so beneficial, and going forward, just really, that it would give me that stability to not be like, I've actually worked for 2-3 months, some projects are longer, and I've not been paid for any of those yet. So it's not that I don't have the money, it's just not in my account yet. Oh God, I've talked last time. Freedom and flexibility on location. So as a freelancer, obviously I'm very heavily invested in Manchester, but that kind of does mean my future is in Manchester, so potentially it would give me a chance to set up somewhere else if that was something I was interested in. Family is something I haven't even thought about, but I feel like universal income, basic income would really give me an opportunity to think about that. And I think autonomy in general over training and development opportunities, that I'd be able to say yes to those more rather than prioritising and taking jobs. And generally, I think just wider education about the fact that money is for everyone and that we all need it. We all need to be well, happy people, and that we all have self-worth, and you'll be able to find what you're good at if you had less pressure on paying the bills. Thank you so much, Holly. It's so kind of you to share so much of your experiences, because it really is every single person that could benefit from universal basic income has those complicated experiences themselves. So thank you so much.